In the year 2073, the world is unrecognizable. Not because of spaceships or alien empires, not because of time travel or futuristic machines, but because it ended, quickly, quietly, and almost completely. What came was a plague, red, swift, unstoppable. This is the Scarlet Plague, a post-apocalyptic vision written in 1912 by Jack London, one of the greatest adventure writers of his time. And while he's best known for tales of wild frontiers and survival in the Yukon, here he turns his gaze to the future, to the collapse of civilization, to what's left when all the knowledge, all the technology, all the order we take for granted is gone. But this isn't just a tale of destruction. It's a story of memory, myth, and the fragile thread of human progress. Of an old man who remembers the world before the fall, and the grandchildren who no longer believe such a world ever existed. This channel is a place for stories like this, classic science fiction, timeless adventures, and the lost gems that still pulse with relevance. If you love journeys through forgotten futures, strange technologies, distant worlds, and the remnants of what came before, then you're in the right place. Subscribe and join us. There are many stories to discover, many landscapes to explore. And tonight, we begin with one of the earliest and eeriest visions of a world reclaimed by time. The story begins now. The Scarlet Plague by Jack London, Chapter 1. In the year 2073, the world is quiet. Open land stretches where cities once stood. The wind moves through tall grass. Scraggly bushes bend against it. Far off, the sea murmurs. An old man walks a narrow trail, barefoot, bent, wrapped in a tattered robe. His beard is long, white, and tangled. His eyes are distant, set deep in a weathered face. He leans on a crooked stick, step by careful step. Trailing behind him are three boys, barefoot like him, sun-browned, wearing crude clothes made of animal skin and fibre. They carry bows on their backs, stone knives at their sides. They are wild, curious, unafraid. To them, the old man is strange, a creature from another time. They call him Granzer, but they don't believe the stories he tells. "You talk big about the old days," Edwin says, the eldest boy, "but how do we know it's true? Maybe you just made it up." Granzer smiles, faintly. "I remember," he says. "I saw it. Before the plague came, before the world fell apart. I walked in cities so tall they touched the clouds. I read books, real books. Machines carried me across the land faster than a hawk in flight." "You always talk about books," another boy mutters. "What good are books when you can't eat them?" Granzer chuckles softly. "They fed the mind," he says. "They held stories, taught us, connected us. Books kept our knowledge alive." The smallest boy, Hoo-Hoo, plays with a fern tied to his belt. "If the world was so grand," he says, "why did it all fall down?" Granzer stops walking. His eyes turn toward the sea. "It was the Scarlet Death," he says, "a fever that burned like fire. It came suddenly, bright, terrible. One day we ruled a world of science and light. The next we were running, dying, watching everything vanish." The boys fall silent. They've heard whispers of this before. But now something feels different. The air is heavier. Granzer lowers himself onto a rock. His hands tremble slightly. "I was a professor," he says. "My name was James Howard Smith. I taught at the University of California, in a city called San Francisco." The boys lean closer. They have never seen a city. "What was it like?" Edwin asks. Granzer's eyes grow bright, just for a moment. "It sparkled," he says. "There were lights that burned through the night, roads smooth and black, buildings so high they scraped the sky. We flew in machines, we spoke across oceans, we thought we knew everything." He pauses, his fingers tighten around the stick. "But pride comes before the fall," he whispers, "and the fall came fast." The boys listen. This is no fairy tale, no warrior's boast. This is a memory, real. "It started with a tremble," Granzer says, "a fever. Then it spread, faster than we could imagine, faster than the doctors could understand." He looks at them each in turn. "I will tell you," he says, "not because it is easy, but because someone must know. If no one remembers, then it is as if it never happened. The sun dips lower, the grass sways gently, the sea breathes in the distance, and the old man begins to tell the story. Chapter 2. It was in the year 2013, 60 years ago. I was just a young man then, 37 years old, strong, well-fed, a teacher of literature, living in a world of order, progress, and pride. We had solved everything, that's what we believed. Disease had been conquered, famine forgotten, the world was ruled by science, the world was safe. We were fools. The Scarlet Death struck like lightning. No one knew where it came from. It arrived without warning, no slow build-up, no warning signs. One day the world was as it had always been. The next, it was unraveling. They called it the Scarlet Plague, because of the colour. That strange, brilliant flush. It began on the face, spread down the neck. People would burn with fever, their eyes would grow red, their gums would bleed, and then they would die. Fast. So fast. Sometimes in hours, sometimes in minutes. At first we thought it was nothing, a local outbreak, isolated, containable. But it spread. Oh, how it spread. It travelled faster than anything we'd ever seen. Across cities, across nations. The doctors, our great minds, were helpless. There was no cure, no vaccine, no time. Panic followed. People fled the cities, but the plague followed. You could not outrun it. It was in the air, in the touch of a doorknob, in a cough, in the kiss of a mother to her child. The government collapsed, markets failed, laws disappeared. There were riots in the streets, fire, gunshots, and then silence. I remember walking through San Francisco. The city was empty. Not abandoned, dead. Cars stood in the middle of the road, doors open, bodies slumped over steering wheels. Children lay motionless in doorways. I tried to help, tried to find survivors. But there were too many dead, too much fear. Even the rich, the powerful, the elite, they died like everyone else. Money meant nothing, status meant nothing. We were all just flesh. And flesh burned in scarlet. I had books in my arms, I carried them with me. Even then, as if they could protect me. Shakespeare, Milton, Poe. They were my company as the world dissolved. Eventually I ran, left the city, headed into the country, found shelter in the woods, lived on roots, berries, small animals. I saw things I will never forget. Children killing each other over scraps, mothers abandoning infants, men turned to beasts. And then even the beasts died. And through it all, the Scarlet Death walked behind us. It did not rage, it did not scream, it simply took, one by one. Until there were only a few of us left. I was lucky, or cursed. Sometimes I don't know which. I survived, somehow, and now I am old, I remember, and I speak, so that you, the ones born after, will know what was lost. Not just lives, not just cities, but knowledge, beauty, wonder, all that we were before the scarlet tide swept it all away. Chapter 3. We thought ourselves gods, that's the truth of it. Before the plague, the world had become a marvel. The cities were vast, our machines were swift. We flew through the air, sent voices across oceans, lighted the night with electricity. We did not fear nature, we had tamed it, controlled it, or so we thought. The railroads stretched across the continent. We had electric trains, smooth and silent, gliding at incredible speeds. We had automobiles, some large enough to carry whole families in cushioned luxury. And the airships, great silver whales floating above the clouds, some shaped like birds, some like needles, all of them humming over rooftops, faster than any hawk. There were 40 million people in the United States alone, and nearly 2 billion across the world. Our cities were wonders. New York, Chicago, San Francisco. Glass towers kissed the sky. The streets buzzed with movement. Everyone was busy. Everyone had purpose. Food was plentiful. Medicine advanced. Diseases like smallpox and typhoid, those were gone. Extinct. Even poverty had nearly disappeared. And the schools were magnificent. From early childhood, children were taught languages, sciences, mathematics, philosophy. We produced minds that could split atoms, control lightning, map the stars. And yet, We did not know how to stop death when it came dressed in scarlet. I remember the first whispers in the newspapers. A mysterious illness. A cluster of deaths in New York. No one panicked. We were used to science fixing everything. We trusted the experts. But the numbers grew. Hospitals overflowed. Then the staff began to die. At first, the rich barricaded themselves in sealed homes, private compounds, but the plague crept in anyway. Some tried to flee to the countryside. That only spread it faster. The air was poisoned, not by chemicals, but by breath. A cough, a handshake, a single word spoken too close. That was all it took. It spread faster than anything we'd ever seen. And no one was spared. Not kings, not scientists, not generals, not children. The cities became death traps. There were no funerals, no burials, just piles of bodies and silence. I saw men shoot their own families to spare them from the fever. I saw mothers drink poison, their infants still nursing. We turned savage or numb. Some danced in the streets, mad with terror. Others locked themselves indoors and waited for the end. The last broadcast I heard was from Washington. A calm voice reading a list of symptoms, urging people not to panic. Then static. The voice never returned. After that, only the wind. The trains stopped. Lights failed. The great engines of industry silent. Within a week, civilization was gone. No armies, no police, no doctors, only ashes. Only the Red Death moving through the world like a whisper of fire. I remember walking through the ruins of a supermarket. Shelves stripped. The air thick with decay. There was a little girl, no more than 5, curled behind the counter. Her eyes were red, her skin flushed. She didn't speak. She just stared. I left food beside her. I never saw her again. In time, I stopped hoping to find survivors. But I kept moving, kept breathing, kept remembering, even when there was no one left to listen. Until now. It was in the days just before the final silence, when the last thin threads of order were unraveling, that I saw the worst. Not the plague itself. No, the plague was brutal, but it was quick. It burned through the body like wildfire through dry grass. But what followed, what men did in its shadow, that was worse. The bonds of society, they snapped. Gone was the law. Gone was decency. Gone was the thin fabric that held civilization together, and underneath, savage chaos. In the early days of the terror, there were those who tried to hold on. Doctors, nurses, teachers, policemen. They gave their lives trying to keep order. But there were others. The brutes, the beasts in men's clothing. When the great machine stopped, they rose like wolves. Looters ran wild through the cities, not just for food, but for gold, jewels, wine, pleasure. They broke into homes. They hunted the weak. They lit fires just to watch them burn. I remember a gang, the chauffeurs, they called themselves. They wore fine clothes, stolen, of course, and leather gloves. They rode in stolen cars, drunken, mad with power. They would raid the outlying farms, drag people from their shelters, and kill for sport. They were a kind of new royalty, brutal kings in a kingdom of dust. One day I crossed their path. They had taken over a mansion, a fine estate once owned by a railroad president. They filled the halls with wine, gutted the paintings, used priceless books to light the fireplaces. They saw me, a thin, tired man with a book under his arm and old shoes on his feet. They laughed, mocked me, called me professor. They offered me a drink. I refused. They offered me a woman, a poor girl they'd captured and drugged. I turned away. So they beat me, not to kill, just to amuse themselves. That was their entertainment, as the world crumbled. I escaped that night, barely. Crawled into the woods, hid for days, ate moss, bark, anything, but I lived. The chauffeurs didn't. None of them did. The plague caught up, even them. Scarlet came for all. You ask me why I still speak, why I tell these stories, because I remember, not just the death, but the cruelty, the failure, the truth. We built so much, but it was hollow. We filled our cities with lights, but the hearts of men were dark. The plague didn't destroy civilization. It revealed what lay beneath it. It showed us who we really were. And now, Now you boys sit beside me, healthy and strong, but dressed in skins, speaking a broken tongue, laughing at books. You live like wild things. You do not know where you came from. That is why I speak, so that somewhere in the ashes of memory a spark may survive. Perhaps one day it will burn again. You laugh at me with your bone-tipped arrows, your crude speech, your bare feet on the earth. You think me foolish, an old man mumbling about things that never were. But they were. I lived them. The world before the Scarlet Death was not a dream. It was real. You call me Granzer, a name that makes you grin. But once I was James Howard Smith, professor of literature, chairman of the English department at the University of California. That university, its white buildings, stood tall on the hills above San Francisco Bay. It had great halls, filled with books, filled with light, filled with minds. You boys, you cannot read. But once we could. We read Shakespeare and Plato and Darwin. We argued ideas, we created poetry, we passed down knowledge across generations. Now, you smear paint on your faces and think strength is all that matters. You laugh at the old ways, at words, at thought, at the beauty we built. But without memory, what are you? Beasts. I have seen your kind chase rabbits through the brush with sticks and screams. I have watched you fight over scraps, forgetting even the names of your fathers. This world, this savage place you call life, was not always so. And yet, you live as if this is all there ever was, as if there were no cities, no trains, no music, no art. I saw a man once, before the end, carve a violin from a single piece of maple. He made it sing. He played Bach beneath the stars, while people gathered in silence, their hearts lifted. What do you know of that? You beat drums and howl like wolves. You are children of the ashes, and yet you are children still. Perhaps you may learn. Perhaps you may remember. That is why I talk, why I tell these stories again and again, even if you mock me, even if you forget them the moment the sun rises, because maybe, just maybe, one of you will listen. One of you will carry the flame. Not the flame of fire, but of thought, of truth, of what we once were. I tell you this, we were not gods. But we reached for the stars, we stood on the edge of the unknown and dared to leap. We made mistakes, terrible ones. We were proud, we were blind. But we built, we created, and we remembered. Will you? Chapter 6. I remember the last time I saw a newspaper. It was blowing down the street, tattered, stained. A headline half torn, quarantine fails, millions dead. And then the presses stopped. No more news, no more truth, only rumors, only silence. I wandered the streets alone. The great city was dead. The buildings still stood. The lights still flickered, but no one was left to see them. I passed a bakery, loaves still cooling on the racks. The baker must have died mid-step. A trolley car had stopped at an intersection. The driver slumped over the controls. The passengers gone. Here and there dogs roamed in packs, once pets, now scavengers. Sometimes I saw fires, houses set ablaze by candles left burning, by desperate hands trying to fight the cold. No one put them out. The fire engines sat silent. The hydrants hissed steam. It was as if the world had exhaled and then forgotten to breathe again. I walked north, toward the sea, hoping, always hoping to find others, and I did. A few. Some were kind, most were not. I met a man in Sacramento, a judge once. He had a fine, white beard and still wore his robes. He spoke in Latin, recited old laws to the wind. He had gone mad, I think. Or maybe he was just pretending the world still made sense. In the Sierras, I found a woman and 2 children. They hid in a cave. The woman had a pistol. She pointed it at me. I raised my hands, told her I had food, books, no sickness. She let me stay the night. But when I woke, they were gone. They had taken my pack, left me nothing but my shoes. I did not blame them. This was survival. This was the end. Eventually, I came down out of the mountains to the sea cliffs. And there I built a shelter with stone and driftwood. I lived alone. Years passed. Once I saw a ship, a great rusting hulk drifting offshore. No lights, no movement, just the wind howling through its hollow decks. And then one day I found people. Not many, just a handful, wandering, starving, like me. We came together, shared what we had, started again, not a city, not even a village, just fire and voices. And that was the beginning of what you know now, your tribe, your family. You think your ways are old, they are not. They are young, so very young. You wear the skins of wolves, but once we wore robes of silk. You throw spears, but we cast thoughts across oceans. You paint your faces, but we painted ideas, on canvas, in books, in dreams. Do not let it all vanish. Do not let the silence win. I am old. My time is short. But you still have time. Time to remember. Time to rebuild. Time to choose what kind of people you will become. Chapter 7. You ask me, Grandsir, how I survived, how I lived through the end when so many perished. The truth is, I do not know. I was not stronger, not braver, not wiser. I was simply lucky. That, and I kept walking. After the cities fell, I wandered. I walked until my feet bled, until the sky turned from red to black to pale again. I found streams and drank. I found berries and ate. I avoided other men, that much I knew. For it was not the plague alone that made the world dangerous. It was the survivors, the desperate, the armed, the broken. I saw a man with no tongue screaming at the trees, another who wore the clothes of a priest but carried a butcher's knife. The fever did not kill them, but grief did. Madness did. I learned to sleep in the trees, to bury my fire at night, to listen for the sound of breath that was not my own. Years passed like smoke. I watched the world become quiet. The highways cracked, the bridges fell, the buildings surrendered to moss and wind and time. But in that silence, life crept back, the deer returned, the foxes, the grasses rose through broken concrete. Nature, patient and eternal, reclaimed the world. And then, children. The first I saw was a girl, not more than 10, hair tangled, eyes hollow. She ran when I called out. But she was real, a generation born after the plague. I found others, small groups, a woman with 2 sons living in a cabin made of metal and clay. They did not speak English. Not really, just broken sounds, fragments of the old tongue. It was then I began to understand. The past was vanishing, not just the buildings or the books, but the memory, the knowledge. History was bleeding away. So I became a teacher again, not in a classroom, not with chalk and lectures, but by the fire, with stories, with names. I told them of the stars, of steamships and cities, of language and science. They listened, some with wonder, others with disbelief. They laughed when I spoke of machines that flew through the air, of lights that burned without fire, of voices that travelled through wires. To them I was a fool, or a magician, or both. But I kept telling the stories, because stories are bridges between the past and the future, between who we were and who we might be again. You boys, you sit before me now with strong arms, wild eyes, and bones pierced with ornaments. You are the children of a world rebuilt from rubble. But in your hearts is still a spark. I see it. Even when you laugh, even when you mock me, I see it. You are not beasts, not yet. And if I can plant even one seed, just one, then maybe the darkness won't last forever. Chapter 8. So now, you've heard it all, or as much as I can remember, the world before, the fall, and the long, cold silence that followed. You sit here, your backs against the stones, the fire crackling low, the sky above you wide and empty, and still you laugh. You shake your heads. You say I speak lies. Dreams. That no men ever flew, that no cities ever stretched across the land, that there never was such a thing as a book filled with printed words. But I was there. I walked those streets. I heard the hum of electricity. I rode in trains that raced faster than the swiftest deer. I stood in libraries with millions of books, all the thoughts of mankind bound and shelved and waiting. And now the stars shine on a quiet world. No more engines, no more telegraphs, no more songs on the radio. Just wind, just the sea, just memory. You boys are the beginning of something new. You do not yet understand what has been lost, and perhaps you never will. Perhaps it is all gone, forever. But maybe... If you hold on to the stories, if you carry them in your blood and in your firelit words, then something might remain. Not the machines, not the towers, but the spirit that dreamed them into being, the courage to build, to wonder, to ask. You are not savages, not if you choose not to be. Even now you could gather the stones, shape the metal, learn the words. You could write again, speak again, think again. The world ended once, but it could begin again. I have told you all I can. Tomorrow I will return to the old place, the university. Nothing remains there now but broken walls and tangled ivy. Still, it is where I was born, where I taught, where I lived, where I believed. I will go alone. You will remain here, hunting, running, growing older. And one day you may remember me, an old man, with clouded eyes, telling strange tales by firelight. Maybe you'll tell your sons, and they'll tell theirs, and maybe one day far from now someone will build again. Not because they remember the machines, but because they remember the possibility. That is all I ask. Carry the memory, let it live a little longer. And now, I am tired. The fire grows low, the night is deep, and so I sleep. And so we come to the end of the Scarlet Plague, a quiet echo from a long-forgotten future, written over a century ago by Jack London. A story of memory, of silence, of what remains when everything else has fallen away. We hope you felt the stillness, the weight of time, the firelight flickering between ancient voices and uncertain tomorrows. If you've enjoyed this journey, and if stories like these speak to something in you, some wonder, some longing, some quiet curiosity, then we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories to come. Strange adventures, forgotten futures, worlds not quite like our own. Subscribe and let the stories find you again, wherever you are, whenever you listen, in the silence between the stars. Until next time, rest well, dream deep, and don't forget, the future is always listening.